The Tiger Cats are celebrating the 1999 Grey Cup Championship team at the home opener on Father's Day, Sunday, June 16th. Take Dad to celebrate the Grey Cup champs. Go to ticats.ca/tickets or call 905-547-CATS.
From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Ticats Today with Steve Milton.
It's Friday, June 14th. This is Ticats Today, and I'm Steve Milton. About 12:30 this afternoon, the Ticats wrapped up full-length practices for the week and have now only a walkthrough tomorrow before their home opener Sunday night against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The biggest news of the day is that shutdown cornerback Jamal Peters, the former Argo, who was signed in February, practiced for the third straight day and could be, gusting up to should be, ready for Sunday. We'll talk to both him and his coach, Scott Milanovic, about that possibility. We'll also hear from Tim White about rebounding from an outing in the season opener that he was not very satisfied with. And we'll end with our final in the three-part series of interviews with players from the 1999 Ticat Grey Cup winners who will be celebrated before Sunday night's kickoff. It's a couple of longtime teammates whose name are on the Wall of Honor and for very good reasons. Kicker Paul Osbaldiston and quarterback Danny McManus. But for openers, we'll turn to Peters. With quick-release quarterback Trevor Harris and receivers like Sean Baines outscoring Edmonton 21-3 in the fourth quarter to rally from a 29-21 victory over the weekend, Peters, who hasn't played yet because of injury, would be a valuable asset to have on the short side of the field. Milanovic said today that he's optimistic one of the Ticats' prize off-season acquisitions can be ready, but whether Peters dresses would hinge on how he feels tomorrow morning and on game day. He can make a difference, not only in his own position, but in returning defensive backs on the other side of the field into their most suitable positions.
Yeah, when he's at the top of his game, he's elite and a difference maker at the boundary corner. So, the next guy up mentality, but it's good to have him in there for sure.
Peters knows it's a long season and that he should be fully healthy before stepping into the lineup, but he's anxious to get onto the field. Here's what he thinks about the Rider offense he'll be facing if he is, in fact, cleared by the medical and training staff to play.
They got good players. Good receivers. Bain is a great receiver. Baker is a great receiver. All the receivers great. Of course, you got AJ. He'll power back. Got to hit him. Trevor, he's been in this league for so long. It's a reason why they starting quarterback. So, it's a good challenge for us, and I think we're going to live up to that moment.
While Tim White had 6 catches last week, he also had a couple of mishandled balls, but Milanovic isn't overly concerned.
In general, Tim was the leading receiver in the league, and I told him the other day that I have total and complete confidence, and we're going to continue to feed him the ball. And I think he believes that, and our quarterbacks believe that, and our team believes that. So I think that's just a blip on the screen.
White, of course, appreciated hearing that from his coach and said he doesn't want to let Milanovic or his teammates down, and he wants to show up early, making big plays in Sunday's game.
Pretty much just kind of refocusing. I feel like my first game wasn't my best game. Just getting back to the fundamentals. That's like the main focus this week, making sure I'm focused on catching the ball correctly, going through my entire process with my releases and then seeing the ball all the way through.
A couple of other sidebars here, mostly off the field. A number of Ticats players, including quarterback Taylor Powell, defensive lineman Dwayne Hendricks and Quentin Barrow, linebacker Kyle Wilson, and safety Stavros Katsantonis, and several others, acted as coaches during the Ticats high school football camp last night, with about 90 players from grades 9 to 12 being put through some pretty grueling paces. And while Sunday may be Father's Day, we'll have a little more on that in tomorrow's episode, there's one aspect of Saskatchewan's visit here for the home opener that makes it Grandfather's Day. Mark Mueller is the grandson of former Rider quarterback and coach and Ticats coach Ron Lancaster. The Little General was the coach of the 1999 team, which will be honored prior to Sunday night's game against the Riders, whom, as a Hall of Fame quarterback, he also led to its first Grey Cup victory ever in 1966. There's lots of connections here. Mueller's father, Larry Mueller, was Saskatchewan's assistant general manager for 3 years and won a Grey Cup in 1989 over the Ticats, with Ron Lancaster calling the game as a color analyst on TV. Mark Mueller spent a lot of time in his earlier summers living with his grandparents in Ancaster and attending practices every day. Now, I can remember him as a 10-year-old in 1999. I think he was about 10 at Ivor Wynne Stadium, getting tips from people like Danny McManus, and then going on to become a star quarterback at the University of Regina himself before moving into the coaching ranks. Of course, his grandfather was the coach of that 99 team. While we're on the topic of paths intertwining, as they always seem to in pro sports, here's Scott Milanovich's take on that, on what he calls the degrees of separation in pro football.
Yeah, it is. It's unique. I think especially in the CFL. Shoot, I've been with how many teams now? Really, I've been with 5 teams now, and it's you see that all around the league. You know, Bo's been with a couple teams. Ricky Ray was with a couple teams. AC was in a number of teams. So, I guess as I've gotten older, you expect it a little bit more. You expect to see it a little bit more, but it's always unique for sure.
As there usually is at Tim Hortons Field, there's a lot going on before and during the opener, highlighted, of course, by the game itself, but also by the debut of the new Stipley experience in the 18,000 square feet of open space in the South Plaza of the stadium. And, of course, there's a celebration of the 99 champs. We'll conclude today with my detailed conversation with 2 of the all-time Cats who played in that game, Danny Mac, that's quarterback Danny McManus, and Ozzie, that's kicker Paul Osbaldiston. Again, it's my honor, it's my privilege to be with a couple of I don't know if I'd call you guys friends, but we certainly saw each other every day for many, many, many years. I think you probably got tired of my incessant questioning. And as I was mentioning off camera, I've had the cold shoulder from both of you, but also some of the greatest interviews I've had in my life have been with these 2 guys. First, Danny McManus. He's now the assistant GM in Winnipeg and the director of U.S. scouting for the Bombers. 8 years as the high tack, right? I think, Danny, and 5 times a Grey Cup champion, 3 times as a player. 1999 CFL Most Outstanding Player. The same year, the Grey Cup, which is what we're talking about today. MVP of the Grey Cup. All kinds of franchise records, Canadian Football Hall of Fame in 2011. And I think I've left some stuff out, but that'll have to do Danny Mac.
Yeah, that's enough, Steve. Appreciate it.
Is that enough right there? Okay.
Yeah, before
and now
Ozzie says anything, you did great, Steve. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome, Danny. And Ozzie, Paul Osbaldiston, but nobody knows him as Paul Osbaldiston. I don't. Everybody in Hamilton, he's kind of like Cher, a single name guy. Ozzie, 17 years. Ozzie is a Ticat, or 16? 17, right?
Well, I don't know if I want to answer you because you just compared me to Cher.
Okay, give me another one-name thing. How about Beyonce? No, all right.
Yeah, 18 years here, buddy. 18 years.
18 years. CFL All-Star 3 times, 5 times Eastern Conference All-Star. The Eastern Conference's most outstanding Canadian way back in 1986, I think, and in that same year, won a Grey Cup. Paul Osbaldiston played for both Ticat Grey Cup winners, the only 2 in something like 50 years, right? The only 2, and Paul Osbaldiston won it on both of them. He tied the CFL record for 8 field goals in a game. He holds tied for the CFL record in 1986 for 6 field goals, Grey Cup in a game. He's got 11 kicking records for the Tiger Cats. Again, known by a single name. People will chant his name, Ozzie, Ozzie. Welcome, Paul Osbaldiston.
Thank you.
Now, you guys, 2 iconic names, 2 really big parts of the last Ticat team to win a Grey Cup. Sadly, that's 25 years ago now, which is what the club will be celebrating on Sunday before the game. You and at least 24, I think, of your teammates and former coaches, including Orlando Sinauer, will be there. Tell me about how you're feeling about coming into town for that, Danny.
Well, I'm definitely excited to see the guys. You always want to, reminisce and talk about the 99 team, and not just the Grey Cup, but how the whole season went and what we went through. Just to see what guys are doing now. We no doubt we'd love to get a lot more players up there to take in the festivities. There's a lot that we haven't seen face to face in a real long time. But when you say 25 years, and that's to be the last Grey Cup champion in Hamilton, that's very hard to believe. But we'll keep coming as long as they keep inviting us. We'll keep coming to the anniversaries and stuff like that. But there's no doubt it's a special group. And it's always exciting to get back to Hamilton and see the fans, but more importantly, see the teammates that you struggled with each game to bring home that Grey Cup championship to Hamilton.
Ozzie, how are you feeling about it?
Oh, I'm excited. Same reasons. Every time that this team's ever been together since that year, it's like we never left the locker room. It's like we'll bust each other the same way. The jokes continue. It was an amazing group of individuals, and everybody had their flaws that were accepted and ignored or capitalized on as far as practical judgment. Um, but the one thing was that team, we spent more time together off the field and in the locker room than any team that I've ever played with. We were always together. We were always sharing things. We just loved each other, and everybody fit in, and everybody knew their role.
Now, it was a different era, and it's always hard to compare eras, but I've spent 50 years in this business, so I've been in a lot of locker rooms, including that one, for a long, long time, many years, and I don't know that I've ever seen a locker room like that. And I'm not just talking about the feeling that between you guys that you guys have just mentioned or among you guys, but it was a bunch of characters. I mean, a serious bunch of characters. Could you maybe describe sort of the mix?
That's an understatement. Yeah, I mean, it was like you said, it was a locker room of characters. It was probably resembled more of a zoo than anything else. I mean, all the
Right.
different animals, everybody was different. But we all knew one thing: when it was time to tee the ball up and play, you're playing for the guy next to you because you want to make
Right.
sure that you do your job so that he can do his job. And then afterwards, we always had the saying, win or lose, drink the booze. I mean, we're still
Right.
gonna. I mean, that was the theme. But we made sure for those 3 hours that we were out there playing that we were giving everything we had for the guy next to us.
Have you ever had a better party than the one after you won the '99 Grey Cup?
I can't remember.
That's what I was going to say. There was some recovering time involved there.
You know what? It was something special. One of the things that I always kind of point back to was that when the stage was up there and the cup was being presented, I didn't go up on the stage. I stood down on the field, and I just wanted to see my teammates and the looks on their faces. There was an awful lot of guys that had never won a Grey Cup, that had played a long time, and it was just a joy to watch them experience that. And the funny thing is, while I was doing that, I kind of took a look to my left, and Danny was doing the exact same thing. He wasn't up either. And then I look over towards, where we go in the tunnel, and there's Ron Lancaster laughing at me and Danny, watching because he knew what we were doing, and he was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It was a team that perfected their roles, and there were so many guys on that team who understood that their role wasn't to shine. It was to make the player next to him better. It was to do whatever you had to do, whether it made you look good or bad, for the success of the team to win the game. And that was the big difference on that team than any other team that I've ever played for. Guys didn't care about, all-star votes or awards or anything like that. It was, what do I have to do to make my buddies look good and this team to win this game? And it was universal across the board. You look at the D line, those guys in the middle, Philbrick, Campbell, Cummings, McCready, they just gooned it up so that Joe Munford could get his one-on-one, sack the quarterback, and if they double Joe,
and Tiggs could make the tackles between the hashes.
Oh, they all could. All our backers, all our DBs. Our defense was solid, and it was the year before. Before Dan showed up and Darren showed up in '98, we had an outstanding defense. Don Sutherland built a great one, but we couldn't score offensively, and we didn't have the direction or the game plan offensively to back up that defense. So once Danny came in, Darren came in, Ron Lancaster Jr., it all clicked. And at that point, 98, 99, we were, the best team in both those years.
I'm glad you said that, Paul, because I've always conflated the 98, 99. You probably could do 2000 too. You could have maybe almost made the Grey Cup that year as well. But let's talk about
Right.
those two. I always conflate those two teams together because they did follow that 2-16 year of 1997. It did, as you mentioned, that was a great defense that set that up. The Ozzie continued to have the great defense. And let's go to 99 though right away, and then we'll come back to the conflation of those two things, because you two guys were part of the two most iconic plays, two of the most iconic plays I've ever seen involving the Ticats. I would probably say Earl Winfield's catch was up there somewhere in the top three too, but we'll talk about those individual plays, one each year in 98 and 99, both against the Montreal Alouettes, both times when they thought they had you beaten in the Eastern Final. So, but let's go to the first year you lose in the Grey Cup to Calgary. I think we were in Winnipeg that year, and you just left them a little bit too much time on the clock. They beat you on the last second field goal. The next year, no doubt, right from the start, you're in Vancouver, and it's your game from the start, basically. I mean, it's 21-0 at the half. What do you remember about that, Danny? About that game itself?
Well, I think the biggest part I remember is Coach Lancaster setting the tone at Brock University in '99. When he showed the highlights of Calgary and their Grey Cup celebration, he just when it was over, he flicked the lights on. And he says, "That's us this year." So he already determined that we were going to be in that '99 game, and you could tell there wasn't a lot of talk that whole week about winning the championship or anything like that. We just had to go out. We had to redeem what happened in '98, and to now just play 3 seconds better than what we did in '98. So in '99, it was the defense came out, got the ball back for us numerous times in the first half, and we were just able to drive the up and down the field. So great catches by the receivers. The offensive line was doing a good job. It almost seemed too easy at the beginning. And then Calgary mounted a little bit of a comeback in the third quarter, but then we were able to put away in the fourth. But, like Oz was saying, it was a group of guys that the biggest thing that we had to do was come to an understanding that this team was our team. It wasn't the owner's team. It wasn't Ron Lancaster's team. It was our team. And the only way we're going to win if all of us are together. And I think that started way back at Brock University back in May of that year of '99, to where we wanted to get back and make sure we finished the deal in '99.
What was your recollections that year, Ozzie, and of that team? And sometimes they say kickers aren't really part of the team, but you were definitely part of that team. You were definitely like a big part of that team, and I'm talking culturally as well. And so, what do you remember that?
Yeah, Danny hit the nail on the head. Training camp was the start of it. We really told our families and spouses and friends that training camp actually started 3 days before it did, because we all checked in Brock and went out golfing, and went out for every night.
Oh, it's out there now. Yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah, that's
they're not.
That's kind of a. Yeah, golfing is, I guess, one word for it.
Yeah, then it's not going to happen, right? So we just, same thing that first meeting, Coach Lancaster set the tone, and I remember the first practice very clearly, and you could just feel it on the field. It was just like, okay, so this 2 weeks of camp, these 2 exhibition games, these 18 regular season games are, just to get us to where we know we need to be. And when we get to where we know we need to be, we're going to be successful. So to me, in my mind, it felt like a done deal the very first step on the field at training camp. And everybody bought into it. There wasn't a lot of changes. It was the same kind of crew. And we just kind of knew, as arrogant as that sounds, we knew. And it was just, we had some pitfalls along the way. We had a game in Montreal that was pretty ugly, but you know what? It brought us, together and humbled us at times when we needed to be. And, hey, it was, like I said, those 2 years in 1986 were the best football years I've ever had.
people might forget, you mentioned, some pitfalls and against Montreal. I mean, you struggled against Montreal early in the year that year. It didn't start well.
Yeah.
You didn't finish first, you finished second. But even though a lot of people knew your talent, you had a little trouble with Montreal during the year. And then, of course, came on at the end to beat them. But in that game in Vancouver, are there specific things that you remember particularly? You talked about everybody playing roles, and they certainly did, but there were also some pretty standout plays. Danny, the catch by Darren. I mean, really, I think you had the game, but that really clinched it. And I'll remind people that anybody who's under 35 now, a spectacular one-handed catch in the end zone.
Yeah, I think that was a big point. Darren making me look good again as normal.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing the ball in. So yeah, it's one of those things when you have a receiver like him and the whole receiving group. I mean, they're all quality guys that want to make sure we try to get each other open. But on that day, Darren ran some good routes and was able to get into the end zone and make some great catches and show his Batman imitation for his son who. Troy, now it's got to be 24 or 23. I don't even know how old he is now. But,
Mm-hmm.
but it's one of those things that, it's the other guys doing the work and then so that you can go and perform your job. And that's what Darren's thoughts were is that, hey, this ball has got to be mine. I got to go get it. And did a great job bringing it in. And then the best feeling in the world for me is me running off the field and Ozzie running on the field to kick the extra point. We'd make a joke with each other, no matter what kind of kick it was, even the 98 kick in Hamilton. We joke to each other as we go back and forth across the field. So, but it's just one of those plays like that. You said Morielli catching a big pass over the middle where his
Right.
body was exposed. It's all the things that are happening. You see the defense tackling Dave Dickinson and. See Dave throwing his helmet in frustration. At that point, we knew it was over, and that was early in the third quarter. So it's one of those things that you look at and say, okay, we just got to keep doing what we're doing, and this game will be ours.
Ozzie, I want to refer something back to something you referred to a couple of minutes ago when you talked about the good defense that had been there prior to Danny arriving. So I'll ask you to speak to Don Southern, to Sudsy, who we all loved.
Yeah.
And gruff as they come, but heart of gold underneath. And there was something that went on there that a lot of coaches. Don Southern was the head coach in 1997. That team went 2-16, which up to that point, or up until a few years later, was the worst record that the team ever had. But the defense was pretty strong, and yet Don got fired as head coach. But when Ron Lancaster was brought in the next year and brought Danny with him. I don't want to say brought Danny with him and brought Darren Flutie with him, but he did bring them with him to the team. At least that's my take on it. He asked Don Southern to come back as defensive coordinator, and all during that year, as the team that had been 2-16 then went, I think, 12-6 or something like that. So 10-win improvement. There was an awful lot of comparisons with him coaching the defense to when he was head coach from the previous year. That must have it was a very manly thing to do.
Well, Sudsy was tough as nails. I mean, he's an old school guy that, you can put all kinds of analogies or descriptions on, what he was like as a man and a football player. And he was just made out of iron. He was. And you're right. He had the biggest heart. He'd come across hard. He'd if you didn't do your job, he'd sure as hell let you know about it, and he'd let you know about it hard. But when you did your job right, and if you were there for the right reason and you were the right type of person, he would love you to the end of the world. He was a great coach, and that year where we were 2-16, we could have easily been 10-6, 10-8. We like I said, the defense was phenomenal. We just didn't have that offense that could score points when we needed the offense to score points. Right. And let's face it, Ron did bring in Danny and Darren. There's no argument about that. It wasn't a, all three of them said, "Oh, you're going to Hamilton?" "Yeah, so am I." No, it was, hey, let's all go to Hamilton. And Ron Lancaster always talked about the fact that, he came to Hamilton because he recognized how great the defense was. and that the offense just needed a little poke and a little twinge and a little change, and they would be successful too. And we sure as heck were. So those three guys came in at the right time, and they turned, let's face it, they turned the whole culture of the organization around. Danny's quiet in the locker room, quiet on the field for the most part, but he leads by example. And if you don't follow that example, you're going to hear from it. That's the only time that Danny would ever pipe up and say anything, is that if you're not working hard, you're not doing your job, you're going to hear it. But, he wasn't the rah-rah type of guy in the locker room. We had Cooler and we had Tiggs for that. The pregame speeches were legendary. I used to leave early because I didn't want to get hurt. Sometimes throw tape around chairs and stools, and it was like, I'm out of here before I get something in the head. They were. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, and you can't package it or can it or create it or draw it up or explain it. Locker rooms like that, culture like that in the organization, it happened, but you don't have a recipe for it, and it's so hard to find. They've got it in Winnipeg for the most part right now because they've got three guys that were those type of players, O'Shea, Danny, and Kyle. They knew what the important things were about players, about the locker room, about how you perform, how you practice, how you spend time with your teammates. So, it was a special couple of years, I'll say that. Thank God those three guys came.
Well, I think, actually we had Mike Campbell on, and he actually got a bit tearful remembering Don Southern and how he handled himself that year. I'd like to, maybe Danny, you could speak. Two presences are going to be hanging over this. Unfortunately, they're not with us, Don Southern and Ron Lancaster. And Ron, whom we called the Little General, but I always felt and wrote several times that the Little General had the heart of an enlisted man. Maybe you could talk a little bit about him, Danny. And did he bring you here?
Well, it was, with Coach Lancaster, having the opportunity to work with him in Edmonton, I knew I wanted to follow him wherever he went. When he was talking about leaving Edmonton, he wanted to get back a little bit closer to home, and Hamilton was the team that had an opening. And it seemed like a perfect fit. I was going as a free agent. I visited Toronto and I visited Hamilton, and I just didn't want to play against that defense at Hamilton anymore. I played when they were that year in '97. Was it? Yeah, '97. We came to Hamilton, and Philbrick hit me in the head, and I think Campbell did something to my leg, and I said, no, I want to be
what a
with
shock.
these guys. I don't want to be against these guys. I want to be teammates with them. So that played a big factor. So I don't know if Ronnie brought me or if it was Suzy defense that brought me to Hamilton, because I just didn't want to play them anymore. And then, if I was going to go to Toronto after playing 2 or 3 times a year, and I didn't want to do that. So it was better being with them and then than not than playing against them. But with Ronnie, it was, everyone talked to him as he's a player's coach. He's this, he's a guy that you can, talk to. And he was everything like that. But he also demanded a lot from you. He wanted to make sure that you understood, don't take the game for granted. You got to put the work in. You got to do your film study. You got to take the coaching. If you don't like the coaching that you're getting here, no problem. We can cut you. You can go somewhere else and think you can get it somewhere else. But he wanted the players that were going to do what the coaches wanted, both on offense and on defense and special teams. He wanted to make sure that he had the right guys in that room to go out there and play football for the 3 hours that we needed him to. And, Ronnie's a special guy in the sense that he played the position that I played at quarterback. And I remember one time I threw 3 interceptions, and he pulled me off to the side. He goes, I just want you to get a better look here from the sidelines. We're going to let the other quarterback go in for a bit. And I said, okay, well, what's that for? He goes, I just want to make sure you realize what color jersey we're wearing. So it was kind of one of those. But he goes, you're going back in next series. I said, okay, coach. But it's just that. He goes, don't worry. If you throw 3, keep going. If you throw 4, don't worry about it. You got to have a short memory as a quarterback with those type of situations. You just got to make sure that you're doing the stuff in the huddle, that those 11 set of eyes that are looking at you believe what you're coming out of your mouth, and that they can go out there and perform it. And you just stay even keel. And I learned that from him and from my college coach, and Coach Bobby Bowden, is, you are an extension of them from the sidelines. And if you can keep everybody to play even keel or maybe 1 to 2% better than what they're capable of doing, then you got a great chance of winning the ball game. And that's just what I try to do at quarterback. And I learned all of that stuff from Coach Bowden and from Ron Lancaster.
I really like that phrase that you talked about being the extension of him from the sidelines, because I remember talking to you about this, how that, and now we're going to get to, we don't have much time left. We're going to get to the two iconic plays I mentioned at the top of this show. So we'll start with the one in 1999 in Montreal, when I told Ron Lancaster just before a couple of days, and I remember that day. I remember when he died. I remember that. I remember you on that day, but just a couple of days beforehand, I was sitting with him on the side there, and even that day, I said, that is still the worst call I've ever seen in a playoff game. And I'll remind people of what that is. And it was called, I think the nickname of it, Danny, was linebacker eligible, right? So you had, I think it was 3rd and short, and you had your beefy lineup in there. I think Campbell and all those guys were in there, some of the defensive linemen. And it was a 3rd and short, except it was going to be a pass down the far side to not an offensive player, but a defensive player who'd been put in there, linebacker Joe Higgins. And you're going against a guy who who eventually became a Hall of Fame cornerback, one of the great shutdown guys, and that's Baron Miles. Baron Miles had it 100% sniffed out, knew exactly what was coming, made it great. He was right in front of it, jumped in front of it, looked like he was jumping the route. And Joe Higgins, if I remember correctly, jumped over the top from behind and plucked the ball away from a Hall of Fame receiver. And I remember you saying, glad Ron made that call. I just had to deliver it. It wasn't on your shoulders at all. Could you talk about that? Montreal thought they had you beaten. You're playing. You didn't even finish first that year. You're playing in Montreal. They're on their way to the Grey Cup. I think they've already got, they probably phoned the plane already that they're going.
Yeah, it was late in the fourth quarter, and it was 3rd and 1 or 1.5, something like that. And because with the two teams on the same sideline, the big guys came running in and said it was the special. So, and I looked back at Ron, and Ron just gave me the nod, and I said, "All right, boys, either we're going or we're not going on this one." And Joe said, "Just throw it, I'll catch it." And that's just the type of athlete Joe Higgins was. And then he goes, "Just you give me a chance, and I'll make it." And I saw Barron. Barron had a look at him, and it was just a matter of making the throw up there and just letting Joe use his athletic ability. And thank goodness he came down with it, because it's a gutsy call, and it's a great call when it works. But like you said, it's a stupid call, and why would you do it if it doesn't work? So that's the game of football. So that's just how it worked. And sometimes you got to make those plays. And if we would have made some plays earlier in the game, we may not have had to come down to that. But that's the game of football. You got to play the full 60 minutes.
Well, it's true, and it's funny. And now that you mentioned that, it may have it strikes me that those may be the last words that Ron Lancaster said to me in our time together. Just a few days again before he died.
How did he answer you, Steve, when you said it was a stupid?
That's about what I'm about to tell you. He said, "Not if it worked." And did it work? Well, I have no comeback, and normally I'd have a comeback to that.
There you go.
So that's the one where Montreal thinks that that's the one in '99, and you're playing in Montreal, because people forget you actually finished second that year, and so you had to play the game in Montreal. The year before, you finished first after, again, being totally out of it the year before. Danny comes, everybody comes, but it still comes down to it. Looks like Montreal's got your number at Old Ivor Wynn Stadium, which faces 90 degrees different than today. So the wind pattern, the pattern was the same, but the way it affected it, it was different. It wasn't almost as predictable as it is today. Today, it's going to be in your face in one half the game, and it's going to be going for you the other half of the game. It's pretty well, it is. It wasn't that way, Ozzie, back then. So what happens is they go ahead. They think they've won. They're ready to go to the Grey Cup. And Danny Martin, what'd you do? I think you had 2 complete passes and a short run, and you're lining up from field goal from the 54, I think, Paul. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was it was, first of all, let's back up and
Yes.
reiterate how great of an athlete Joe Higgins was. He was
Sure.
Very good.
incredible. He could have played any position. He
Yes.
actually picked up a ball and started punting a couple of times while in practice. And I was looking up at the ball and I said, Joe, knock that off. He could do anything. He was fantastic. What a special guy he was too, special teammate. Yeah, 98, the old stadium was different. We always had, the winds off of the lake or the southwest winds. And when we had the winds from the southwest, like we did in that day, it would hit the stadium and it would kind of swirl around and go different directions and different speeds just because of the way that, the stadium was set up. So when Montreal scored that touchdown, right away I knew I was just going to get a chance. Like, I don't know how, but I just knew. And so I saw Danny and Coach Lancaster talking, and so I walked up there because I was either going to tell them, but I knew they were going to ask me. So they started turning around and yelling for me. I said, hey, I'm right here. I know. Just get me to the 50-yard line. Get me to the 50-yard line or better and keep it on the right hash, and I'll make it. Right? And Montreal made a massive mistake that they kicked off deep left to the old scoreboard. Right. And the wind at that end just howls through there. Now, if they'd have kicked off deep right, they might have gotten another 10 or 15 yards on the kickoff. But it hung up in the air. It actually bounced in front of Ron Williams. It was that short. He scooped it up, ran up, and then, we were real close right off of that. It was basically a pass to Flutie and a run to Ron to get the ball in the right hash and pass the 50, and that was it, and I ran off the field. I started running on the field, and Danny comes the other way, and I said, thanks. Could you get me any closer? He said, I got you an extra 3 yards, Pat, so make it.
But you're underplaying the wind there because it was a different wind once the ball got high too than it was down where you were. And I've often described you as an amateur meteorologist. I don't think you were an amateur at all. I think you were a pro. Yeah. You knew the winds not only of here but of every stadium. And so how did you know? And where did the kick start out? And it had to bend. Didn't it arc quite a bit to the left?
Oh yeah, yeah. Left? I aimed about 15 feet outside the right upright because I've kicked. At that point in my career, I'd kicked 1,000 field goals in that direction with that wind. So I knew exactly what it was going to do. And, it gusts and it swirls a bit. So if I aim out that far and the gust doesn't happen or it slows down or changes a little bit, it'll sneak inside the right upright. If it howls and cuts across to the left like I thought it would, it'll make it inside the left upright. And it didn't stop blowing. It if anything, it kind of picked up a little bit. And, I could see that they were running on their kick-out team and that they were all confused. So they had 4 guys back in the end zone. So I knew I had all day to kick the field goal. It wasn't like I had to get it up and, it wasn't like a 20-yarder where they're trying to block it.
That's a good point. Yeah. I never thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I could see I'm going to get no rush. I got all day to kick this thing. And, Darren put it down perfectly as he always did. And I thumped it and, the wind kept going. So it snuck inside the left upright and had 3 yards on it. Thanks to Danny.
When did you know? When did you know that it was good? Did you have to wait until the arms went up?
Darren jumped right in my face as soon as I hit it. And I didn't really see it go through. He was in my face, and I'm holding on to him. And he's always said he knew right away without even looking up by the sound of the football that the sound that my foot hit the ball, right? Because it's very distinctive when you hit a good football and you don't. Yeah. And he said he didn't even watch it. He just jumped right in my face. He knew that I had made it.
What's your angle on the play, Danny? Where are you standing, and what do you see, and what's your reaction?
I was kind of right around midfield and just watching it. I knew if getting them onto the right hash, and with Ozzie's experience in that stadium, we're going to have a shot. And the way he hit it, it took off. There was a unique sound when his foot hit the ball, and you could see that he got everything. He hit it right, hit it pure, like in a golf shot. You hit it pure, And you could see it flying. You know, there's no doubt it was way out. I mean, it was out of the end zone. I mean, he hit it very good, and it was just one of those. You're looking up saying, did it go through because of the angle going through? But then I saw Ozzie get tumbled by all the rest of the team. Then I realized, okay, it had to go through. I mean, Darren's jumping up and down. All I see is Ozzie's back of his jersey go to the ground because I don't know who jumped on him, but everybody was like a big dog pile in there. So, and then I looked over to the right, and there's Coach Ritchie on all fours slapping the ground, not believing that it happened, that it went through again, that we beat him again in the last minute of the football game. But you know, Ozzie was the one that determined whether we were going to kick off or, you know, wherever the wind was every game. Coach Lancaster relied on him quite a bit because he's just because of, you know, his experience, but also his expertise with the wind in all the stadiums around the CFL. So when we had the wind in the fourth quarter, we just wanted to get a chance to give him an opportunity to kick the ball. And Montreal had first down on the 1 yard line, and they went ahead and plunged it in. They could have took off some more time, and then they maybe not even had to kick off, but they went ahead and scored right away. That gave us time to at least make the catch. You know, Darren did a good job because everyone knew the ball was going to go to Darren. Right. So he made a good, you know, he made up his own route. And again, I found him somehow and it just worked that way. But yeah, just some of those moments coming on and off the field when Ozzie runs on, that's exactly what was said. That was perfect. And now just make it. And he did it. He did his job. You know, we did our job and he did his job. That's kind of how everybody worked at it.
I'm going to summarize there and edit or end as a columnist always should by giving my take on that. That play right there puts you into the Grey Cup, and from that Grey Cup, you guys have both mentioned you learned in '98 that set the tone from day one in '99, which gave Hamilton in turn its first Grey Cup in 13 years and last chance to win a Grey Cup in every decade in the 20th century, which you ended up doing on the very last game of the 20th century. And unfortunately, the last Grey Cup in 25 years for a team here. And I'm sure you guys will talk about that all this weekend, all of the, you know, the things that meant, but more, I'm sure, about the relationship among the guys. And it's one of the few times I've ever wished that I was a player. So that you could be more part of that kind of celebration.
We would have done a lot of things to you. You may not have been able to handle.
No, I probably wouldn't have been able to. All right, guys. Well, that's a perfect way to end it. That's a verbal metaphor for exactly how it is. So, guys, I want to thank you so much. Danny McManus, Danny Mac, Paul Osbaldiston, Ozzie. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, that's it for Friday. Thanks for listening and watching, and please tune in for tomorrow's episode when we'll run down the depth chart of the 46 players dressing for Sunday's home opener. This has been Ticats Today, and I'm Steve Milton.
This has been Ticats Today with Steve Milton. Catch it on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.